Hello and welcome. I'm DDF Racer, and recently I upgraded my sim racing pedals to the Fanatec Clubsport V3s. Previously, I'd been using Logitech gear for the best part of 10 years, either a G25, a G27, or a G29, so this is pretty much everything I'd ever known. Logitech is effectively the entry-level sim racing brand, and don't get me wrong, heaps of people use it. It's one of the most widely available brands of sim racing gear out there, but it does have its limits. The pedals that come with a Logitech G29 use something called potentiometers to measure your inputs, basically a position-based sensor. So basically what that means is you put your foot down 100% and it measures 100%. If you put your foot down 50%, it measures 50%, and 25%, 25%, so on. On the other hand, the Fanatec V3s use something called a load cell sensor, which basically measures the pressure you're applying to the brakes, not the position. Depending on your preference, you can either stiffen up or loosen the pedals using the springs and settings provided, but no matter how hard or soft they are to press, it all comes down to how much you press the pedal, not how far you move it. This is much more like how actual real-life brakes behave, and according to all the theory, it's much easier to memorize and adapt to the force you're applying through your muscles onto a load cell than how much angle you put through your ankles and feet into a potentiometer. And when it comes to getting the most time out of a lap, being good on the brakes makes such a massive difference. Being able to brake later, harder, and more consistently sets up the apex of the corner so much more nicely, and that in turn allows the car to transfer the weight more smoothly too. This means the car is more settled throughout the corner and means you can get on the power better, get a faster exit, and carry that advantage all the way to the next corner where you can, again, get on the brakes better and save even more time. It adds up pretty quickly, especially when you're on the limit and you need to modulate the brakes to avoid locking up. Over the past few weeks, since I've been getting used to a load cell brake pedal, I've noticed it's so much easier to find the limit and stay within that limit. As soon as I notice the telltale signs that the grip is running out on the brakes, I can just ever so slightly just let a little bit of pressure off the pedal and maintain the grip, whereas previously on my G29s, I kind of had to guess how much to physically reduce the angle on the pedal by. But this is all subjective though, really. I mean, I could talk all day about how it feels different on my new load cell V3 pedals compared to my potentiometer Logitech G29 pedals, but the best way to actually show you is to load up the data. A few weeks ago, I dabbled with a program called Z1 Analyzer and took the Porsche Carrera Cup Deutschland 2019 car for a run at Oschersleben in RaceRoom Racing Experience. Link to that video on top of the screen right now. That actually turned out to be my last ever run on my Logitech G29 pedals, but the data is still there, so today I'm going to fire up the exact same combo, with the only difference being I'm now using the Fanatec Clubsport V3 pedals. I'm going to go and do some laps on the leaderboard and see how much I can beat my previous best time by, which was a 1 minute 31.199 seconds. I'll put a link in the video description to the car track combo in RaceRoom, specifically the leaderboard, so if you guys want to go and give this a go and see how you compare to my time, you're more than welcome. But I'm going to show you the footage from my best time now, so have a look at this, and then I'm going to load up Z1 Analyzer, look at the data, and see how a load cell compares to my old Logitech G29 lap.
was 130.47.
So there you go. Turns out my best run with the Fanatec V3s was a 1 minute 30.474 seconds. Almost 6.5 tenths faster than my effort on the Logitech G29. So, as you can see, I've loaded up Z1 Analyzer, so let's have a look at the data and see where all of those differences are. And the first thing that I can see is the brakes. Let me highlight in on a bit here at the bottom. You can see the coloured lines are the faster lap and the grey lines are my old lap. So let's just zoom in specifically on this section here. This is braking for turn 1. You can see compared to the first lap, I am braking a lot harder. In fact, I'm maxing out the brakes for what looks like the best part of 2 seconds there. And I'm braking later, but I'm also coming off the brakes earlier. So if I play this section here, you can see something very interesting. This bit here. There's a little dip coming back on the brakes. Now, I talked about this in my first video, that I felt like I was constantly putting too much brakes on and then locking up and then coming off and then realizing I wasn't braking hard enough and putting them back on. You can see that on the grey line here. There's a peak, there's a dip, there's a peak, there's a dip, there's another peak, there's another dip, and then boom, the brakes just drop off completely. On my newer lap, there is a almost instantaneous application, so I'm really stamping on these new Fanatec's. That is a very quick application of the brakes, and that is because the travel is so small. I've actually stiffened my pedals up quite a lot, so I don't need to press them far, but I am putting a lot of force onto them. So the initial thing I've noticed here is on the Logitech's, it was a lot of travel, and you couldn't affect the travel of the pedal. You couldn't change physically how much it moved. Whereas on the Fanatec's, you can dial up the preload all the way to the maximum, and it moves like a centimeter, which means you can just slam on the brakes so much quicker. The pedal physically has to move less distance, as long as you put enough pressure on, of course. So I can brake later. In fact, let's have a look. Nearly 2.5 tenths of a second later, and according to this, 17 meters later, I am actually at that point of the circuit, 237k, whereas on my previous lap I'm already dropping speed because I'm already braking, I'm already down at 225k. That's just going to save so much time, and I wasn't locking the brakes. I just wasn't using enough brakes on the Logitech's because I just couldn't really tell how much I was using. Okay, now this little peak here, ideally, that should be a smooth curve. It shouldn't be like it should be just a nice smooth curve, because that means you're coming off the brakes nice and smooth, and it means that you're not having to it means that I'm still braking too early because I'm having to get back on the brakes. And you can also look at the steering. I'm steering in at that point of the track. You can see this section here, 6% more than I was before, so maybe that little dab of brakes is just to try and help nose the car into the corner a little bit, try and get the weight back on the fronts. And this bit here in the throttle, that's also telling, because don't forget the Fanatec V3s, it's not just a brake pedal, it's your brake, accelerator, and your clutch as well. Now obviously I'm not using clutch in this because it's a flappy paddle Porsche, but the application of the throttle is so much smoother, and this is actually something which I'd never realized until now. I'm just going to zoom in on this bit specifically. You can see the individual steps on the Logitech wheel because the potentiometer just couldn't measure the detail. Look, you can see very distinct click up, click down, click down, click down. Like, it's kind of, the resolution just isn't there in the pedals. That is actually a very good demonstration of the difference in resolution. The green line is the Fanatec's and the grey line is the Logitech's. The line is so much smoother. These are going to make very microscopic differences, don't get me wrong. This isn't where all the time is coming from. The time is coming from being able to feel the brakes better. But this is going to keep the car more stable. It's not going to improve your driving. If you're not braking and accelerating in the right points, having a better resolution on your pedals isn't going to give you better lap times. But if you're kind of in the right ballparks, this is where the detail is. It really is. I mean, you can see on the steering is the same because I'm still using the same wheel. I'm still using the Logitech G29 wheel, but the pedals, it's just so much smoother. And that's going to keep the transfer of the weight a lot smoother as well. It's just not going to, it's not as notchy. It's just, I'd never seen that up until this point, obviously, because I haven't looked at the telemetry until now. That's fascinating. So let's move along further in the lap. Let's have a look at this section here. This is the braking towards turn 3. Let's play this section. Let me play it again. So I'm braking heavier, but coming off and then trailing it more than the first lap. So what that is effectively doing is getting the car slowed down more in the early section of the braking zone and let me carry more speed into the corner. It's obvious when you look at it like this, and that's because in RaceRoom at least the rumble is set up on the pedals, and I know that I'm not locking up. I'm not guessing that the car is locked up or not. I know that it's not locked up because it's not vibrating like crazy. There's a bit of vibration going on, but it's not like when you're locked up it's maximum vibration on the pedals. So I know that I'm safe. I know that I can apply 100% in the brakes and get away with it. Because I've been at 100% brakes, I've got the car slowed down in a much quicker time than on my first lap when I was only using 84% brakes. I'm carrying the same speed into the corner, but I'm just getting it done in a shorter distance. Now this bit's going to be interesting. I'm moving along on the lap a little bit further now to the awkward little turn 4 and 5, and I don't know the names of the corners. I really should have done more research before I started this video. I never quite got the hang of it on either lap, but let's see. This will be a good indication of the accelerator differences. We've talked about the brake a lot in this video, but the Fanatec V3 does have an accelerator pedal on it as well, so that's not to be overlooked. So let's play this. Let's have a squiz. Okay, something very interesting I just saw then. It's not as sharp on the initial application of throttle. On the Fanatecs, I feel like I can feather it a lot better than I can on the Logitechs. There's a lot more of that fine control at the start of the pedal travel, which you just don't have previously. And you can see here, there's a little dab just as I'm turning in. I've applied some brakes. Not as much as I did on my first lap previously, but I've applied some brakes. And I felt that I'm not going fast enough into the corners, so I got back on the throttle again. This is probably quite a common thing that everybody does. You've misjudged the entry, so you have to try and balance it back out again. The key to getting a perfect lap on any lap is not having those additional inputs. I think I did it earlier in the corner as well. Like in the first corner I did an additional dab on the brakes because I hadn't slowed it down enough. Now this is the opposite. I haven't got enough speed going into the corner as opposed to too much speed before. So, a little dab on the throttle, which is also, when you think about the weight transfer, that little dab on the throttle, I've got my turning done. I put the throttle on, it's going to put the weight back towards the car, away from the fronts. It's going to reduce the effect of the steering. So you're going to have to either put more steering in or come back out of it again. So people think a lot of the time that the steering wheel does all of the steering, but actually your feet, your pedals, have a massive impact on how the car rotates. There's a little dab here, just between these two corners, just to get the car accelerated again. I know I'm safe. I can feel it on the rumbles. I'm not running out of grip. Whereas previously, my throttle was completely flat through this. And I know on the Logitechs, if I wanted to apply a little bit of throttle, then I wouldn't really know how much I was applying. You can see my throttle inputs on the Logitech. They're all peaky. There's no throttle inputs below like 20%. 30% because I just don't have that control. And even if I did, the notchiness would kick in as well. I mean, you're talking like microscopic movements on a Logitech, whereas on a Fanatec it's because of the springs, because of the smoothness and the resistance, it's a lot easier to just put those fine controls in. Now moving a little bit further on the lap, this is the high speed, right left right flick that you can't really take too much speed into, otherwise it's just going to sail straight off the track in traditional Porsche style. So let's have a look at this and let's look at the telemetry. Watch the throttle, watch that green line very carefully. Now obviously ignore the bit where I run a little bit wide off the side of the track. That's it didn't give me a track warnings limit in RaceRoom, so I must have had at least one wheel within the white lines. Doesn't look like it, but I must have, otherwise it would have invalidated that lap. And it's the same for everybody as well, so yes, that counts. That still counts. But anyway, back to the point. Look at how smooth the throttle is. There's none of this wavering around business, like it's up and it's down, it's up and it's down. There's none of that I had on the Logitech, which you can see on the grey line. With the Fanatec's, it's a much more gradual application of throttle as well. So it turns out that I'm actually taking 80 meters on my faster lap, on the Fanatec lap, to go from that dip to maximum throttle. as opposed to about 60 meters on my Logitechs. So I've got a much more progressive action on the throttle. It may have lumps in it. You can see here it's kind of goes up to from 17 to 64%, stays constant, and then 85%, and then goes up to 100. That should be a bit more of a straight line, but I'm actually taking longer to get to full throttle on the Fanatec's. You can see here the steering is very constant. There's a little bit of a release there, but I'm not sawing at the wheel. I'm not correcting it too much. I'm using the throttle to progressively get that car, as I know I'm safe on the exit. I know I can get on the throttle because, again, the rumble is in the pedal, and the sensations throughout the wheel and the VR references as well. I know it's safe, and that's just makes a world of difference. The weight transfer is so much smoother. And look at the speed at the top of the screen as well. That blue line on my faster Fanatec lap, I went down to 126k, so my lowest speed through that corner is 126k. Compare that to my lap on the Logitechs. My lowest speed was 123. It might not sound like a lot, but I'm actually 3k faster through the apex, which is just going to help so much better all the way down the next straight. And that's something that I said at the start of the video. It's not just about the braking, it's arriving at the apex in a much more controlled manner than before, much more predictable manner, and then being able to carry that stability through the apex, through the exit, all the way down the next straight. Speaking of which, let's have a look at the end of the next straight and see the difference in braking for this little chicane here. I think it's the Shell chicane? I probably got that wrong. Olaf will correct me in the comments, no doubt. Watch the delta in the bottom. So here at the start of the lap, you can see 5 tenths ahead. Coming out of the corner, 7 tenths ahead. I've just found 2 tenths of a second in that braking zone alone. That's huge. And how have I found it? Well, once again, you can see the brakes are applied very quickly, and the maximum braking is more maximum than before on the Logitechs. Again, I'm applying 100% of the brakes. It's scrubbing the speed off in a much more efficient manner, and the brakes are trailing as well. On the Logitechs, I had to dip the brakes just to get it back in again, and on here it's much smoother, and that again just sets me up so much more progressively for the second half. The application of throttle gets up to 75%, whereas the same distance I'm only at 60% on the Logitechs. So I can get on the throttle earlier, I can apply more throttle more smoothly, and I don't peak as much. You know, on the Logitechs I actually get back to 100 at this point of the track, whereas on the Fanatecs I'm only at like 87, as you can see here. I don't need to be at 100% throttle at that point of the track because I'm turning in for the left-hander, and I don't need to carry that speed. Because I'm not on the throttle so much, you can see here my turning is 20% to the left, whereas maximum turning here on the Logitechs is 16% to the left. So I'm turning 4% more. I'm carrying more speed, I'm braking later, and I'm accelerating earlier and more progressively, and that's where the 2 tenths are. It's as simple as that. It's just a lot smoother. It's a lot more precise, a lot more controlled. And let's move on to the final corner of the lap here. This is possibly my least favorite. I've never figured it out, and I've still not figured it out. It feels like I can take so much more speed, but as soon as I try, it all goes away. So let's have a look. It just always wants to wiggle that rear coming out the final corner every single time. It just wants to do a little death wiggle. The brakes aren't as quick here. I've had a more progressive application of the brakes compared to normal, but it's not really maximum when you look at the grey line. I'm kind of getting on the brakes and then realizing, oh, I need to press a bit harder because of the travel in the Logitechs. The travel in the Logitechs is so much longer than you can set up the Fanatec's. I mean, if you wanted to, you could have a really soft pedal on these V3s. It's completely up to you. You don't have to use the extra springs. You don't have to use a performance kit. You can wind the preload all the way to the minimum, and you'll have quite a soft, spongy brake that travels quite a bit. But most race cars don't have the travel in the pedal. It just doesn't move that much. It really doesn't move that much, centimeters, if that, to go from 0 to 100. It just means that you can use your muscle tension, muscle memory to release, because you're not coming off the pedal and saying, oh, I need to hold my foot at 50%. You're coming off and say, oh, I need to give it half the force. And it's a really hard thing to explain, and I haven't really touched on it on this video so far, but it is so intuitive on a load cell. Try it with your hand right now. Just trust me, guys. I'm making this up as I go along. There's no script for this. I'm I think this will work, but put your fist on your hand and push as hard as you can. You can remember how much force you're putting on. You can kind of feel how much force you're putting on. So try this again. Push as hard as you can, and then come off like 50%. Don't push all the way. You know, there's still a bit of resistance there. And you can kind of hold that resistance. You can kind of feel how much you're pushing by. If I say, put your fist in the same position that you were on 50%, is it there? Is it there? Is it physically? That's what a Logitech is like. It doesn't measure the force, it measures the position, the physical position. That is the huge difference. You can memorize force so much easier than you can memorize position. That is the massive advantage of Fanatec V3s that I have found so far. I'm only 4 weeks into using these things, and I'm already nearly 0.7 of a second faster than my previous lap. With some more practice, who knows how much faster I'll get. There's only so much speed I can physically get out of the car, but at the same time, I know I can get more speed because there's these little dips where I've corrected because I haven't put enough throttle in or I've put too much brakes in. Having a program like Z1 Analyzer to be able to see this and to be able to go through the specifics and actually physically look where the time is absolutely fantastic. I'll put a link in the description for you guys if you want to go and have a look at Z1 Analyzer, but before I wrap the video up, I'm just going to show you something incredibly obvious. This is the brake analysis point. This is, I don't know why I didn't look at this first really, this actually just tells the whole story. So if you look here, the track has been split down the middle, and on one side there's a blue line and on one side there's a red line, so blue is Logitech, red is Fanatec. You can see here, look at the difference. Look how much later I'm on the brakes on the Fanatecs, on the red line at the bottom. And if I click this box here, 20 meters. Huge! 20 meters is huge. It took me 0.15 of a second less to get to maximum brakes. I exited the corner 20k faster. I exited the first corner 20k faster using the Fanatec pedals. And I used more brakes, but I was on the brakes for less time. Let's scroll and have a look at the next one. Now the red line is at the top now, and the blue line is at the bottom. So blue is Logitech, red is Fanatec. Again, I'm later on the brakes by 10 meters this time. I'm on the brakes for nearly 0.2 of a second less. My exit speed is 5k faster. It's just time all the way through the lap, guys. Tenths here, tenths there. Anyway, I'm just rambling now, guys. I should probably start wrapping this video up. This is a perfect demonstration of why people rave about load cell pedals, and I get it now, I really do. I mean, if you're thinking about upgrading your sim rig, then I see why people say the pedals should be the first thing you sort out. I mean, I'm still using my G29 wheel, feels fine, and you'll probably be completely fine with the wheel you're using at the moment too, but the ability to have that fine control over your feet just takes your driving to the next level. I hope you found this video useful, guys. If you are thinking about upgrading and you're currently sat on the fence as to whether you should or shouldn't get load cell pedals, then hopefully I've done a decent job and a pretty open and honest job today of describing where the differences are and showing you the data as well. And if you are thinking about upgrading, then there's a link in the video description which will take you to the Fanatec store, exactly the same as normal, where you can make your purchase just as you normally would, but as a way of Fanatec saying, thank you DDF Racer for using and reviewing our gear, they'll actually give me a split of the sale. Now it doesn't cost you any extra, and it doesn't take any more work either. It's all automatic. You just click the link, go to the store, buy your stuff as normal, but it helps me. Next up on the list, it could be the shifter, it could be the handbrake, it could be, if everything goes really well, it could be a direct drive wheel, who knows, guys. But with the link that Fanatec have given me, it's just a way of saying thank you, Dan, for making this stuff and pointing people in our direction. So you don't have to use the link if you don't want to, but it's there if you want to help me out. It'd be much appreciated if you do. Right then, you guys know the drill. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave it a like, and especially today, please, 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 please share your thoughts in the comments. I would absolutely love to know what you made of this, the data analysis, and also your thoughts on the load cell, potentiometer, Logitech, Fanatec discussion as well, guys. I'd really want to know, so thoughts in the comments, please. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the DDF Racer YouTube channel as well if you aren't already. Big red button below, maybe even the notification bell, because that way you'll find out when I upload more videos like this, and also put my new pedals into action on my live stream races. Thanks for watching, guys, and as always, just look after yourselves. See you soon.